All people are afraid of something. This is fine. Fear is a natural response to environmental stimuli, it is a response. If we lived without fear, then humanity would have perished long ago from many causes. But the whole trouble is that fear needs to be eradicated, it needs to be fought. Otherwise, he will drive you into a corner and never let you go free. Fear devours the soul. Alina has been afraid of the dark all her still short conscious life. And it all started from childhood. One day, she accidentally locked herself in a closet and sat alone until late at night until her parents returned and pulled her out of there. Later, at the age of 16, she almost became a victim of a rapist, returning alone from training late in the evening. Then pepper spray and quick legs saved her, but there was no one in the dark alley. If she had not managed to escape, then no one could have helped her. Now she is 20 years old and she is studying at the university. Alina understood a lot and changed in herself, became more mature and experienced, became responsible. The girl even forgot about her fear of the dark, left it in the past, as she thought. But in fact, it was not possible to overcome the phobia. This fear sat deep inside her and was just waiting in the wings. Hey guys, wait for me. I caught my hair on a branch, damn it. Yes, we are waiting. Kolya chuckled. Forever, Alina, you will catch on to something, then the shoelaces will untie. Usually this happens to guys, but not to girls. Ha! Very funny, Kolya. Alina snorted in response, throwing her lush hair behind her back. Well, I'm such a klutz, what can I do? As a guy, you wouldn't stand aside and laugh, but would help the girl get out. The gentleman is also called. Oh, our Alina broke up. Supported Kolya by their mutual friend Matvey, so you already got out yourself, and besides, advice for the future: tuck your hair in a ponytail and you will be safer. Oh, the advisor was found here, you look. I myself will decide what to do with my hair, maybe I like walking so much. Well, I like it so much, your business, said Kolya. You're fine now, let's move on, there's not far left. Do we really need to go there in the evening? Alina asked cautiously, peering deep into the forest. Also only more interesting, Alina. And scarier. Is anyone afraid? Matvey writhing faces ran around the girl with his hands up. Well, yes, I'm afraid, but who would not be afraid, Alina admitted, removing her hair from her eyes. The place is really dumb. What's true is true. Kolya confirmed with a frown. But we've been wanting to go there for a long time. We won't be long, Alan, don't worry. I think the worst thing there is to fail somewhere, so you have to be careful. Exactly. And we got there by the end of the day, said the girl. If you are afraid, you can go home, Alina. Matthew couldn't resist. We are not forcing you there. Then you will only regret that you refused. They say that inside there are cool acoustics, and the atmosphere is peculiar. It's only 5 o'clock now, it only gets dark at 9. After these words of Kolya, the friends set off again. They went to one entertaining abandoned, which was in the local woods. It was an unfinished brick barracks from Tsarist times. It is surprising that it has survived almost untouched, although a long downtime without human care still made itself felt. There were all sorts of stories and rumors about this building, and there were very few reliable historical data. It is only known that at the end of the 19th century, they wanted to build a whole military unit in the then backwoods here, but something went wrong. History is silent on this. As a result, even one single building was not completed by the servicemen. Apparently there was a very good reason for this. This is where the weirdness is just beginning. The very place around the old unfinished building instilled in people not only horror, but an unpleasant feeling of uncertainty and depression. It did not arise immediately, but after a short time of being near the abandoned barracks. People who have experienced this have noted sudden nervousness and bouts of paranoia, inexplicable fear. According to them, there was silence, followed by an eerie unnatural rumble, almost imperceptible. But from all these inexplicable phenomena, I wanted to run away from this accursed barracks without looking back as far as possible. So, at least, they said. But talk is one thing, real experience is quite another. In the meantime, the cheerful trinity wandered carelessly along the forest path, getting closer and closer to the goal. The June sun brightly illuminated their path with its rays. But the closer the friends got to the abandoned barracks, the denser the branches of the trees intertwined over their heads and the darker it became around. "Look, we've made it," Kolya finally announced, pointing with his finger at a dilapidated rectangular brick building of a dirty orange color. It actually looked a little ominous. Almost all the windows were intact and there was impenetrable darkness behind them. The barracks was 3 stories high. And just on the ground floor, a couple of windows were broken, and someone boarded up the front door with boards. "Well, horror!" Matthew exclaimed. "Yeah, guys, it's all so dark capets. Let's go back, shall we? We got to this abandoned place, nothing special, why stare at it?" The frightened Alina hesitated. The sight of the dark windows terrified her, and she remembered her childhood fears, how she was afraid to fall asleep without the light of a night lamp and even close her eyes, because then it became dark. Kolya noticed how scared his friend was and decided to calm her down. He walked over to her and put his arm around her shoulders. "Alina, if you are very afraid, then you can wait for us outside, we won't be long. I don't want to be alone in a place like this." The girl was indignant. "Why do you want to go there so much? It is dark and dangerous there, everything can collapse at any moment. You boys always have to look for problems on the 5th point." "Aha, I agree. Well, such is our nature, what can you do?" "You yourself wanted to go with us, Alina," reminded Kostya. "I already regretted that I agreed," Alina muttered gloomily. "Look, there's nothing to worry about." Matvey joined Kolya. "It's just an old building, that's all. And people always compose stories to make it more interesting. In fact, none of them has been confirmed yet, and there are many such places on Earth." "How do you know? Have you been everywhere?" "Well, I watched films," Matvey answered in his defense. "Guys, I'm just very afraid of the dark. Well, I thought that I had already overcome my phobia, but as it turned out, no. Now I looked into these empty dark windows and it rolled over again. And yes, this place is kind of evil. Do you feel anything?" With those words, the girl looked uneasily at her friends. There was an awkward pause, which Kolya broke. He walked close to the girl and looked into her eyes. His gaze became serious and determined. "Listen, Alina, a phobia is not good, and you have to fight your fears, do you understand? Otherwise, they will devour you from the inside, make you weak and sick. You can't let fear take over, it's best for you to overcome it once and for all. Face him face to face. I understand that this fear arose in you for a reason, but there are no horrors in the darkness, everything is only in your head." With these words, he tapped his temple with his finger. Alina swallowed the lump in her throat and exhaled heavily. Kolya's fiery speech made her think. Then she stammered a little in a trembling voice, "Okay, I'll try to overcome my fear." "That is great. Well done. You are very brave." Koka was delighted and approvingly patted Alina on the shoulder, smiling. The girl smiled back at him. And Matthew suddenly muttered displeasedly, "So, well, that's enough to smile at each other, doves, let's go to the house already, while it's still dark, otherwise it will be more difficult to get out later." Friends silently nodded and went to the barracks. The trinity cautiously climbed through one of the broken windows, having previously cleared the dusty opening from broken glass. And now the guys found themselves in the thick twilight of an old building. However, the twilight abruptly turned into darkness, as soon as you stepped out of the square of window light a little. The friends turned on their flashlights and cautiously headed deep into the unexplored space of the abandoned barracks. The air was heavy and musty, dust lay everywhere and began to swirl with every step. It smelled of dampness and smelled of antiquity everywhere. These gray, shabby walls, high ceilings, rough-hewn half-rotted tables and beds in spacious rooms. And black doors covered with cobwebs. Gloomy empty corridors and stairs. All this was terrifying. But most of all, the deathly silence made me feel restless. But for some reason, they didn't want to disturb her friends. They were whispering to each other, discussing this or that thing. Although Alina was very scared, everything was much easier with friends. Especially in the hands was a flashlight. The girl gradually began to get used to this unpleasant and uncomfortable environment. Darkness is like darkness. Nothing special, she said to herself. And little by little Alina began to believe that in the dark there really was nothing to worry about. And this feeling brought her to a real delight. Alina smiled, as she rarely managed to overcome something negative in herself. It was very cool. Confidence grew within her. Out loud, she didn't say anything to her friends and just walked silently, looking around the abandoned gloomy rooms with interest. Meanwhile, the guys had almost bypassed the entire barracks. Actually, there was not so much to explore here, to be honest. Yes, and it turned out that there is nothing to worry about. A little creepy, but nothing more. Friends walked through all the floors and decided to go down the opposite stairs. When they were almost down to the first floor, Alina decided to lag behind them a little in order to perform a small ritual of curbing her phobia. It suddenly occurred to the girl that it would be nice to consolidate her determination in fearlessness before the darkness with certain actions. Alina turned off the flashlight and continued to feel her way down the stairs in total darkness. With the palm of her left hand, she felt the cold and rough brick wall, and in her right she squeezed the switched-off lantern. The girl had to go only a couple of steps to the floor. Suddenly, the deathly silence was cut through by Alina's hysterical scream, followed by the roar of the collapsing floor. Alina heard her heart beating wildly. The girl cleared her throat loudly as she swallowed dust. Alina was lying on something hard, cold and smooth, which surprised her. Why are the floors so smooth in this crumbling barracks? However, this thought flashed fleetingly on adrenaline. At first she didn't feel pain either, but the bodily sensations quickly returned, and with them the fear of understanding what had happened. She failed somewhere. Still, it happened. Resentment, anger, resentment, fear and misunderstanding mixed in a wild cocktail of emotions. But it was necessary to act quickly, and not to panic. It was necessary to get out as soon as possible. Alina herself was amazed at her sudden composure. The girl quickly felt herself for injuries. Everything seemed to be intact. It was still impossible to see anything. When the girl fell, she closed her eyes reflexively. But when I opened my eyes, I realized that nothing really had changed. Complete darkness. The girl raised her hand to her face, but saw nothing. And then fear began to quickly return to her, growing into a real panic. Alina realized that she was completely alone somewhere, apparently in the basement of a terrible abandoned place. It was too dark in here, and those oddly smooth floors. It wasn't normal. The horror of the situation pressed on the poor frightened girl more and more. She began frantically fumbling around the floor in search of her flashlight and, along the way, calling for help from her friends. They really need to hear. Kolya. Matvey. Help. I failed somewhere. I'm very scared, it's so dark in here, and I lost my flashlight. Alina shouted, crying into the dark void. She walked. Mournful sobs were replaced by a joyful exclamation, when the girl finally groped for the treasured metal cylinder in the darkness. Alina quickly reached out with her thumb to the power button. Clicked. A flickering beam of white light cut through the darkness. Already something. Only now the flashlight shone for some reason now much worse, although the batteries in it were new. Alina did not want to think about it and, rising to her feet, directed the beam of the flashlight up to give the guys a guide. Then she opened her mouth to call for help again, but her scream froze in her throat. A beam of light made its way through the darkness literally for a couple of meters, after which it dissipated and was absorbed by the impenetrable thick darkness. Alina was horrified even more. Then she jumped up with her arm outstretched. His palm rested for a moment on the smooth, cold ceiling, exactly the same as the floor. The girl could not stand it and screamed in hysterics. The same phrase "this cannot be," was repeated in my head. The girl suddenly realized that she did not understand where she was at all. And on the floor there was no debris from the upper floor and dust, which defied any logic. But Alina quickly realized that she was in a very tight space. And the walls were as smooth and cold as all the surfaces in that damned room or whatever the place was. It looked like a granite box, or more precisely, a crypt, from which there is no way out. Only darkness in a cramped and frightening space. How much more air is enough? Alina, meanwhile, continued to scream hysterically for help into the void. Tears rolled down her cheeks. And inside, despair was growing, mixed with the horror of the unknown. Help! 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 The girl cleared her throat. She couldn't scream anymore, her throat ached from the uncontrollable screams. Help! Alina said hoarsely, almost in a whisper, and fell silent. Then she flopped down on the slippery floor and leaned against the cold wall, hugged her sharp knees and quietly wept again. Mom, Mommy. I want to go home. I want to go home. The girl hooted, resting her wet eyes on her feet. She didn't want to believe it was all real. It couldn't be real, it only happens in a nightmare. I'll wake up in my bed now, I'll wake up in my bed now. Like a mantra, the distraught Alina repeated again and again. She curled up into a ball and waited for this nightmare to end. After all, like any dream, it must end one way or another. Alina lost track of time. And in general, she lost all understanding of what was happening. She was seized with horror and madness. And then she cautiously decided to open her eyes and lift her head from her knees. There was someone sitting right in front of her, or something. The flashlight no longer worked, but Alina's eyes got used to the darkness, even to such an impenetrable one. And in this darkness, the ominous outlines of some incomprehensible twisted creature loomed. And the most terrible thing was that his eyes burned in the darkness with two red infernal lights. Alina also heard the heavy, inhuman breathing of this creature. The girl froze in horror, trying not to make a sound. And meanwhile, the ears were torn from a terrible rumble. For some reason, the sinister creature was in no hurry to attack, and this only increased the tension. Alina's body was numb with fear, but this could not go on forever. What happens if she breaks? I didn't want to think about it. As well as what kind of creature this is, how it got here and what it wants, as well as what kind of place it is and where it is located. It is apparently impossible to get out of here, but Alina really did not want to die. She tried to pull herself together and remembered Kolya's words, "There are no horrors in the darkness, everything is only in your head." This surprisingly gave the girl strength. "It's all not true, it's not there, it's all just in my head," she began to repeat a new mantra to herself, like a spell or a prayer. At that moment, a scarlet inverted five-pointed star suddenly lit up in the darkness, and in the center of it was an eye that began to pulsate. And suddenly there was a crackling and rattle, and Alina felt the walls begin to move towards the center of the dark room. The two crimson lights were getting closer, the buzzing in my ears turned into devilish screams. The girl could not stand it and the last cry escaped from her throat. As soon as Kolya and Matvey heard behind them the terrible roar of the collapsing floor and Alina's wild screech, they immediately rushed back to the stairs. To say that they were scared would be an understatement. Kolya, shouting Alina, no, was the first to run up to the edge of the hole that had formed and first shone a lantern there. Matthew followed. The guys immediately recoiled a little from the edge to clear their throats and rub their eyes. Clouds of dust and small debris rose into the air. I had to wait until it all settled down to make out at least something. I did not want to jump into the unknown in such a place. After a few seconds, the friends were able to see a pile of debris at the bottom of a shallow black shaft, built of smooth black stone that looked like granite. It looked very strange. The guys quickly went downstairs and without wasting time began to rake the blockage. They didn't want to think about how poor Alina looked under him now, whether she was alive at all. Everyone already regretted that Alina went with them and blamed himself for this. But there's nothing you can do about it. The guys dealt with the wreckage in a few minutes. But what was their bewilderment when there was no one at the bottom of the blockage. "Where did she go?" exclaimed the frightened Kolya. "She just disappeared. She's gone. It's just crazy. She couldn't just vanish." "We must look further," said Matthew. The guys silently continued frantically throwing stones, but they did not find anything. They alarmed everyone, but their friend's body was nowhere to be found. She just disappeared. It defied any logic. Finally, exhausted and frightened friends, driven to despair, realized that Alina was not in this mine. They checked the floor 100 times, as they pulled all the large debris from the shaft up, climbed every centimeter with flashlights in search of some secret hatch, but found nothing. Friends were internally devastated. They did not know what they would say to Alina's parents and their acquaintances. There were no thoughts. They wanted to lie right here and die. But it was impossible to do so. Other people should know what happened to poor Alina. We shouldn't have put pressure on her. Kolya said quietly, almost in a whisper. Who could have known that this would happen? We walked through the same place, but did not fail anywhere, Matvey noted. But still, that doesn't change our guilt. Climbing these abandoned places is dangerous, and I'm not going to come here again. What the hell is wrong with that damn mine? What will we say at home? What will happen next now? I don't know, Matvey, Kolya answered in a low voice, without raising his head. Let's go home, we did what we could. Matvey silently nodded, after which the friends dusted themselves off and, helping each other, got out of the strange black mine. They walked slowly to a broken window at the far end of the corridor. They've never been so badass. The guys were in no rush. Meanwhile, it was getting dark outside. And suddenly they heard a strange pop behind them. The guys both turned around at the same time and with amazement saw how the darkness was cut through by a weak trembling beam of a lantern, and the light was beating directly from that shaft. Friends perked up again and rushed back to the hole in the floor. When they ran to the edge of the mine for the second time, they saw Alina at the bottom of the pit. Alive because she was breathing hard. But they were immediately horrified, noticing deep wounds on her face and chest, resembling claw marks.